Right now, the consensus is that inflation will be under control by 2026. All the major forecasts, from the Congressional Budget Office to the IMF, are pointing to inflation cooling off and settling down. But these official forecasts are missing a ticking time bomb. There's a hidden factor buried in the global supply chain that almost nobody is talking about, and the data shows it could trigger a massive, unexpected wave of inflation. I'm going to show you what it is, and the evidence that forecasters are ignoring. Let's start with the comfortable story everyone wants to believe. If you look at the mainstream forecasts, 2026 looks pretty calm. The consensus is that inflation will land somewhere between 2.6% and 2.9%. The Congressional Budget Office is on the same page, projecting its preferred inflation measure to be around 2.7% in 2026. JP Morgan's research team is a little more worried, thinking core inflation could speed up to 3.2%, but even that doesn't exactly scream crisis. This whole view is built on a few big assumptions: that the supply chain chaos is behind us, that housing inflation will keep cooling, and that the Fed has basically won its fight against high prices. It's a nice story. It suggests we're getting back to normal after a few years of economic turmoil. But what if that story is dangerously incomplete? What if the models these institutions are using have a huge blind spot? When you dig into months of trade data, a disturbing pattern starts to emerge. A powerful inflationary force has already been set in motion, but it hasn't fully hit our wallets yet. And when it does, it's going to make those consensus forecasts look like wishful thinking. So what is this hidden threat? It's the delayed impact of tariffs. Now, tariff pass-through sounds like a boring economic term, but think of it like a cost virus. When a tariff gets slapped on imported goods, it's a tax. Someone has to pay it. The hope is always that the foreign company will just eat the cost to stay competitive. But the data shows the opposite is happening. Throughout 2025, we saw a dramatic escalation in tariffs. The average rate on U.S. imports shot up, with some sectors like steel and aluminum facing especially steep hikes. And the economic evidence is clear. American businesses and ultimately, American consumers are the ones paying the price. Studies from the New York Fed and top universities have shown that the vast majority of these tariff costs are passed on to the U.S. importer. This means the import prices for goods hit with tariffs have risen significantly more than for goods that weren't. So if these costs were rising all through 2025, why didn't we see a huge inflation spike right away? This is the critical point everyone is missing. It's all about timing. When the tariffs first hit, a lot of big companies had a buffer. They had stockpiled inventory they'd bought before the tariffs took effect. So instead of hitting their customers with a massive price hike overnight, they absorbed the initial costs and slowly used up their cheaper pre-tariff stock. It protected their profits for a while and created the illusion that tariffs weren't a big deal for inflation. By late 2025, a significant portion of these costs were already hitting final consumer prices, especially for durable goods. As of early 2026, those cheap inventories are gone. The Peterson Institute for International Economics highlighted this in a recent analysis, noting that companies have now burned through the stockpiles they built up. Now, they have no choice but to buy new inventory at the much higher tariff-inclusive prices, and they are not absorbing the costs anymore. After holding back for months, they're starting to pass these higher costs on to you. Not all at once, but bit by bit. This is the cost virus spreading through the system, and we're already seeing the first symptoms. This delayed reaction is the fuse on the 2026 inflation bomb. The fuse was lit in 2025, but the explosion is set for this year. The Peterson Institute warns that this delayed effect alone could add another 0.5 percentage point to headline inflation by the middle of 2026. This brings up a huge question. If the data is out there, why are the big forecasts still so low? The answer seems to lie in the methods and mindsets of professional forecasters. Let's be honest, economic forecasting is notoriously difficult, and experts can be wildly overconfident in their models. There's a tendency to put too much faith in models that are, by nature, overly precise. Their internal beliefs often shift much more slowly than the real world, creating a major lag between a change in the economy and a change in their published forecasts. This isn't a new problem. During the inflation surge from 2020 to 2024, regular households' inflation predictions were often more accurate than those from the experts. That suggests that when the economy goes through a big structural change, the models experts rely on can break down, while the people actually experiencing price changes on the ground have a better feel for what's really happening. Essentially, the forecasters are driving by looking in the rearview mirror. They see the relatively calm inflation numbers from late 2025 and just project that forward, completely missing the tidal wave of costs building just under the surface. The delayed impact of tariffs is the secret trigger for this inflation bomb, but it's not the only thing ready to ignite. Several other powerful forces are converging that will pour fuel on the fire. First, government spending. The federal deficit is projected to be over 5.8% of GDP in 2026, which is far above the historical average. Some analysts, including those at the Peterson Institute, think it could even go as high as 7%. This isn't just a number. It's a massive injection of demand into an economy where the supply of goods is already being squeezed by tariffs. More money chasing more expensive goods is the classic recipe for inflation. Second, a tightening labor market. Recent shifts in immigration policy are significantly reducing the labor supply. For years, the U.S. economy relied on immigration to help fill jobs and keep wage growth from getting out of hand. With a major slowdown in the number of available workers, businesses now have to compete harder for a smaller pool of people. That means higher wages. And where do those higher labor costs eventually end up? They get passed on to consumers as higher prices. Third, monetary policy is looser than you might think. And finally, after years of high prices, people are starting to expect more inflation, which can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you combine all of it, massive government spending, a shrinking labor pool, and rising expectations, with the delayed shock from tariffs, the outlook gets alarming. This is exactly why the Peterson Institute for International Economics concluded that a scenario where inflation rises above 4% by the end of 2026 is not only plausible, but arguably the most likely scenario. That's not a fringe prediction. It's a sober assessment from a highly respected institution that is looking at the full picture. If you're finding this analysis valuable and you want to stay ahead of the curve on the real risks in the economy, take a second to subscribe to the channel. My goal is to give you the data you need to see what's coming before it happens. So, what does this all mean for your money? An unexpected inflation shock would have serious consequences. It would eat away at your savings. It would likely cause more volatility in the stock market. And most directly, it would mean a higher cost of living, from groceries and gas to cars and electronics. This isn't about panicking, it's about preparing. So, what should you watch to see if this is playing out? First, keep an eye on import price data and the Producer Price Index, or PPI. These are leading indicators. You'll see inflation pop up here before it hits the main Consumer Price Index, or CPI. Second, listen to corporate earnings calls. When you hear executives talking more and more about margin pressure, input costs, and needing to use their pricing power, you'll know the pass-through is picking up speed. Third, watch inventory to sales ratios. If these ratios stay low, it means companies have no buffer left, and any new cost increase will be passed on to you almost immediately. And finally, consider looking at alternative real-time inflation trackers, like the model run by the Cleveland Fed, which tends to be more responsive than the big survey-based forecasts. The story you're being told about 2026 is one of calm and control. But the data tells a very different story. The consensus is ignoring the delayed but powerful impact of last year's tariffs, a cost bomb that is making its way through the supply chain and is set to detonate this year. Combined with huge government spending and a tight labor market, it's the perfect storm for an inflationary shock that almost no one sees coming. The next few months will be critical. By watching the right indicators, you can see the evidence for yourself. Thanks for watching. In our next video, we're going to break down another hidden risk, the surprising fragility in the corporate debt market and how it could trigger the next financial tremor. You won't want to miss it.